Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's edition of Big Country Politics. This is our Sunday conversation. Today I'm joined by Mr. Roland Gutierrez. He is the Texas State Senator. He is now a candidate for the Texas U.S. Senator spot, looking to challenge Ted Cruz when it's all said and done. Senator Gutierrez, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Manny. Thank you for the time.
Tell me, what inspired you to challenge fellow Democrat Colin Allred in this primary race that eventually all roads will lead to facing off against Republican Senator Ted Cruz?
You know, Manny, first off, again, thank you. Texas is really broken. It's really broken, Manny, and we've been living under 30 years of Republicans telling us that everything is so wonderful, that somehow we're living in some kind of Texas miracle. The fact is most people are living in a Texas nightmare. You know, it's not miraculous when 800 people die in a winter storm. It's not miraculous when children die and wait 77 minutes for those that were left alive to be rescued. The failure that happened in Uvalde, which is part of my district. I mean, I'm actually on Marathon, Texas today at the westernmost part of my district, talking to folks here and in Alpine. And, you know, the failings that occurred that day weren't just isolated to that moment. You're talking about failings where you had a community ask this governor for radio infrastructure, asked Ted Cruz as well for radio infrastructure that should have worked on that day. We had infrastructure that should have worked when it froze in 2021 and it didn't. We deserve more as Texas taxpayers. We deserve more as Texans than people that are in government that would rather talk about cultural issues like Barbie movies and Bud Light. We deserve a Texas senator that has serious solutions to the serious problems that we're facing.
Well, in the last Senate race, Ted Cruz ran away with rural Texas, while Robert Francis O'Rourke claimed much of the metropolitan areas of the state. I believe it was only a separation of about 2.6 percentage points, which is very, very close. Tell me, Senator, what's your approach to rural Texas as you are in rural Texas today? Or is there an approach when it comes to the rural areas of the state when it comes to this race?
Well, first off, I think Bethel united, so many people in our state to talk about these problems that I just mentioned, and we have to. For my part, I'm born and raised in South Texas my whole life. I'm a gun owner and I get it. But in this legislative session, when we tried to pass common sense gun reform, like raising the age limit on access to assault rifles, extreme risk protective orders, if you had a person that was mentally ill, you should be able to go in and take those guns if they're making threats. Closing the gun show loophole. 66% of Republican voters were in favor of those types of legislations. We've got to be able to have a serious discussion on that piece. But more importantly, we got to talk to rural Texans, Democrats and Republicans, and tell them, look, man, you've been screwed here and you've been lied to. Ted Cruz wants to tell you he's for you, but yet he votes against a $66 billion bipartisan infrastructure bill that meant jobs and money and opportunity for all Texans. He voted against the Inflation Reduction Act to stabilize our economy. Thankfully, we were able to get that done. He voted against the Safer Communities Act to keep kids and families home and keep us confident that we could still go to school and go to the mall and go to church. He has voted for all of the ARPA funding, the federal money that came in as a result of COVID. These were valuable things. And so if rural Republicans want to go off and buy off and think that somehow Ted Cruz has got their back, just look at the facts and you'll find that he not only doesn't have your back, he doesn't care about you. And the first time it got a little bit rough and a little bit cold, he fled to Cancun while the rest of us stayed here and hunkered down and did the best we could helping our neighbors.
Well, following the horrendous Uvalde shooting involving the deaths of 19 children and 2 teachers, you've been a big advocate for tougher gun laws. Texas is a major Second Amendment state. As a U.S. Senator, what would tougher gun laws look like?
Well, Manny, we need to have a real discussion about what's happening. I spent hours and hours, hundreds of hours, looking at body cam footage, looking at everything that happened to those poor children. Images that see every night and every morning when I wake up in my mind, images that I can't take out of my head. The fact is, we need to be able to do something about this rifle that these shooters are using so much. And we can have a discussion on an assault weapons ban with exceptions for military or retired military, exceptions for law enforcement, exceptions for agriculture, because Texas leads the nation in wild hog population, which destroys our crops. Why can't we have that discussion? And if we're not going to have that discussion, let's have a discussion that says, we're going to raise the age limit on ARs. We're going to have extreme risk protective orders, and we're going to close the gun show loophole so that not anybody and everybody can go buy an AR-15 without even so much as showing a driver's license. We have to have a very serious conversation, because I don't want the horror that I've seen to happen to any other Texan. It's too much, and it's happened yet again, as we all know. It happened up in Allen. People deserve to be secure, and they deserve to allow their children to be safe.
Well, coming up after the break, more with Texas Senator and candidate for U.S. Senator Roland Gutierrez. We're talking the barriers and his reaction to Governor Abbott's decision to challenge the Biden administration. That and more coming up on Big Country Politics.
Big Country Politics on KTAB continues.
Well, hello and welcome back to our Sunday conversation here on Big Country Politics. I'm Manny Diaz. This week we're joined by Roland Gutierrez, Texas State Senator. He's also candidate for Texas U.S. Senator. Senator Gutierrez, you represent Eagle Pass and 400 miles of Texas-Mexico border. You urged Governor Abbott in a letter to remove what you call the deadly buoys and razor wire from the Rio Grande River. Tell us about this letter and what these floating barriers are doing or not doing for the Texas-Mexico border.
Yeah, Manny, what they're not doing is they don't formulate any kind of real immigration policy. They're not a deterrence. I mean, the fact that they put this razor wire in the water is just completely cruel and inhumane. It's not Texan, and it's un-American, quite frankly. It's what other countries do to people when they torture them. We deserve to be seen in a better light than that. And the fact is, there is no metric that he has given under Operation Lone Star that is shown to be an effective stoppage on immigration. The real facts are, over the last 2 months, that the president reinstituted Title VIII against every Republican objection and lawsuit that came about. Title VIII is a law enforcement protocol. Immigration crossings have cut down in half since the reimplementation of Title VIII. Because then immigrants can be tagged, they can be processed, they can be deported, and a second reentry winds them up in federal prison. That's always been the law. Under Trump's chaotic Title 42, you could come in, never tagged, never processed, go in and out without a problem. And really and truly, that was the problem that we were facing. This whole notion that they were staying in Mexico, that wasn't true. They were crossing through the river, as they always have. And so we have to have a real discussion on how to solve our immigration problem. Ted Cruz doesn't want to have this discussion. He likes to yell about it all the time. We have an aging population. We can fill millions of jobs in agriculture. Our ranchers and our farmers want to fix the broken H-2A visa program. It's a mess. And they deserve to have workers that they can count on all year long, that want to be here all year long, adding to our economy. We deserve an H-2B visa program for our construction industries that are having trouble finding people that want to work in 110-degree heat. We've got to reformulate that visa program, all those visa programs, and we have to have a discussion about creating an outside Department of Labor within our U.S. consulates abroad. For instance, if you're a Colombian and you want to come to the United States, if you come to the border, you're going to be rejected. But you can go and apply for a job at the U.S. consulate, and you'll get filled when that job opening comes. I mean, we have to rethink immigration policy 100%. The United States Chamber of Commerce, the Texas Association of Business, the hospitality industry, the restaurant industry, they all are asking and demanding that we have a fix to this issue because they need workers. That's just a simple reality. We can do this better.
Along with, just immigration, the issues that we're seeing on the border, we're seeing a lot to do with human trafficking, sex trafficking of children and what have you. In terms of policing that, making sure that children are safe and that we're not experiencing these type of things. The Sound of Freedom, certainly the film shed a lot of light on that. As a U.S. Senator, how would you address those type of issues?
Well, listen, you can only do so much as a country, but we can certainly think about what we did in Colombia. We sent the DEA in the 80s into Colombia to fix the problems. We can do that in northern Mexico. We can do that with the cartels that are dangerously affecting our communities along the border. But let's be real. Half of the AR-15s that end up in Mexico come from the United States, and more than half of those come from Texas. And so we have to have a real discussion about that. These people that are taking advantage of marginalized people along the border, taking women and children and putting them through a process to try to get across, sometimes rape and mutilation and so on that you just discussed. It's not right, obviously, and we need to push back against them, but we can do it. We should have a discussion about that. I don't hear Ted Cruz or anyone else saying, let's send the DEA after the cartels, because they are hurting our Texas economy. They really and truly are. When you look at the gas that comes from the United States into Mexico and what they're doing in that space, when you look at produce and what they're doing to the produce that comes over here and the cost that's associated with their infiltration of those industries, all of that bottom line gets pushed back to American consumers. Let's have a real discussion about it.
Do you see what we're experiencing on the border a crisis, or what would you call it?
The last 2 months under Joe Biden, border crossings have been cut in half. The same Republicans that are talking about this crisis, like Greg Abbott and others, they like to create chaos and foment chaos to say that this is the problem that's facing all of us. Well, let's be clear, it's a problem, but it's a problem that we can fix and it's a problem we can solve. But under no circumstances are those immigrants responsible for our poor education outcomes in Texas, or our poor healthcare outcomes, or our poor grid outcomes in Texas, our poor mobility problems in Texas. We have real issues that are facing us, including immigration. But we need to have serious people that aren't going to talk about Barbie movies and Bud Light like Ted Cruz likes to do. We need to have serious people that want to get to work, that have a proven track record of getting big things done. I've done that in the Texas legislature. I created the National Center for Warrior Resiliency with Republican opposition, finally got that amendment through. I created the Farmer Suicide Prevention Act because farmers in the United States have the highest incidence of suicide in the nation, again, with Republican opposition, and we were able to get it done. We've got to be able to talk about the things that are truly hurting us in rural Texas and everywhere in between. But in order to do that, we've got to be able to bring serious people to the forefront, people that want to solve problems, people that want to bring back resources to our state.
Senator Gutierrez, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Manny.
All righty. For State Senator Roland Gutierrez, I am Manny Diaz. This has been another Sunday Conversation right here on Big Country Politics. We'll see you next week.